I'm sure you all heard about Red Bull's DRS advantage earlier in the season, as everyone clamoured to work out how they were so much faster than the rest of the grid. Every professional and armchair analyst out there had a go at explaining it, and the triple DRS theory eventually became favoured. With Red Bull's upgrades for the Hungarian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton reckons that advantage is gone. Is he right, or is he just trying to put pressure on his old rivals? Let's check it out. At the Hungarian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton bagged a shock pole position over Max Verstappen by the absolute slimmest of margins, just 0.003 of a second. That is about 1/100th of the time it takes to blink. To a human being, their lap times would have looked identical. It's just the stopwatch that allows us to tell the difference. Considering Max has been taking pole position by a few tenths of a second for most of the season, the time it takes you to blink, the result was a big surprise. Had Mercedes suddenly found some time with their setup? Had Red Bull's upgrades hurt their qualifying form in some way? It needs some investigation and a few more races to be sure, but Lewis Hamilton had a theory over the weekend. I mean, they've still got the DRS, but they don't have the DRS advantage all of a sudden that they used to have, Hamilton told Sky Sports F1. Where did that go? They've just had an upgrade, so we expected them to have taken another step. We heard it was around 0.2 or something like that, so for them to not have been able to extract that in qualifying is interesting. Hamilton's comments obviously triggered some intrigue about a potential shift in performance for Red Bull, whose RB19 had stood out earlier in the campaign for its huge straight-line speed advantage when DRS was open. In the races, that hasn't been too relevant for Max apart from when he has had issues in qualifying such as at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. During qualifying though, when all cars can use DRS through all the DRS zones, the acceleration and top speed advantage Red Bull have received has been critical to them getting pole position. This hasn't always been the case. In Baku, before the true scale of Red Bull's dominance was known, Charles Leclerc took pole position off Red Bull by almost 0.2 of a second. The track in Azerbaijan has a massive DRS zone on the pit straight as well, but the Ferrari driver still managed to overcome the Red Bull DRS advantage. Logan Sargent's Williams actually topped the speed trap chart over Verstappen by a whole kilometre an hour, but that's beside the point. A quick look at the speed traps in Hungary seemed to back up Hamilton's viewpoint. The Red Bull was no longer clear of the opposition in top speed. Verstappen's 260.9 km an hour across the start-finish line increased to 304.9 km per hour by the time he hit the speed trap before the Turn 1 braking zone. This was not much different to Hamilton himself, who was 260.3 km an hour across the start-finish line and also hit 304.9 km an hour at the speed trap. Red Bull's lack of advantage in Hungary also appears to be nothing to do with the short start-finish straight, because it was the same pattern early in the season in Australia too, which has an equally short run down to Turn 1. Verstappen was 311.2 km an hour across the start-finish line in Melbourne and 328.8 km an hour at the Turn 1 speed trap. Hamilton was 307.8 across the start-finish line there and 324.3 km an hour at the speed trap. So Merc was significantly slower despite the short start-finish straight. The shift in dynamics is clear, and Hamilton's comments would appear to suggest that something has indeed changed on the Red Bull. He could be bringing the thought that Red Bull have been asked to change something by the FIA to the media's mind. It wouldn't be the first time a team has tried to highlight something they thought was illegal and wanted investigating. The pink Mercedes that Racing Point fielded a few years ago is a perfect example of this type of media manipulation. Unfortunately for Hamilton, Sky Sports' Ted Kravitz, among others, was very quick to quash any theory that the FIA had asked Red Bull to make changes. Kravitz believes Hamilton is trying to create something from nothing. I know Lewis Hamilton is starting to encourage us in the media to ask questions as to why Red Bull, in his view, why Red Bull aren't as quick as they used to be. And in his view, why Red Bull aren't getting the same advantage from the DRS that they've had all season, he said in his post-qualifying notebook. I'm not sure that's ultimately true, but Lewis certainly wants to put that out there and get the media to investigate it. The reality, however, is much simpler to unravel, and according to rival engineers who keep a close eye on car developments, is more down to car setup choices at different downforce levels, and especially beam wing configurations. Digging into where Red Bull has got its DRS advantage, the theory is that the speed boost it gets from DRS comes mainly from the fact that the RB19 has a bigger percentage of total drag coming from its rear wing than others, so when the wing is open, the benefit is greater as it loses more air resistance. I'm not saying the rear wing creates more drag than the other cars. just that the rest of their car creates less. This means, as a percentage of total drag, Red Bull's rear wing contributes more than their rivals. This ratio comes from Red Bull, first being more comfortable to run a typically larger profile rear wing, but second, running a much smaller beam wing, sometimes just one element compared to other teams who often double up. The beam wing has proven to be a critical aspect of the current generation of cars in helping deliver extra downforce to stabilize the rear of the car, as it works in conjunction with a diffuser, which in turn helps with the underfloor airflow. This means that when the DRS is open, its drag levels are much reduced compared to rivals who have double beam wings, hence the huge DRS effect compared to the opposition. When the team goes for a high downforce option and runs a double beam wing, so its drag levels are on par with rivals, the DRS advantage does not appear, exactly the pattern we saw in Hungary. So what does this mean going forward? Well, considering that the next race on the calendar is Spa, Red Bull's DRS advantage is going to be back in force. The reality for Red Bull's rivals is that if they want to match it in the DRS stakes, then they need to shift the drag ratio at the rear between the main wing and the beam wing. But to do so will require faith that they can trim back the beam wing without losing too much downforce. That hasn't stopped the teams from trying though. Aston Martin brought a new package to the Canadian Grand Prix featuring a heavily revised side pod and floor. The update enabled Fernando Alonso to take second after a more difficult Spanish Grand Prix, albeit on a low downforce circuit Gilles Villeneuve that was more suited to the AMR23. Its update was mainly focused on efficiency, with the team admitting that Red Bull's key DRS advantage was something that the Silverstone outfit is trying to close down. When asked if its Montreal update was partly aimed at having a more efficient DRS device, Aston Martin's performance director Tom McCullough said, "That has been an area of focus for us, so we're sort of working at that every upgrade we bring to the car. It's all tied to helping the efficiency under the DRS switch, so we're making further steps on that all the time, and this is a little step on that. Any updates on the car is just focused on having more efficient downforce, especially in the areas where maybe we weren't quite as strong as we were before. Maybe some of the updates we've got on the car will suit some other tracks even more than they suit Canada. We were expecting those updates to the AMR23 to show their full effect at Silverstone, where you can get loads of use out of your DRS, but Aston Martin finished 7th and 14th there, so clearly something went wrong. Spa will be another chance for them to test their DRS improving upgrades, as the Belgian circuit has some pretty scary high-speed sections. Since that upgrade, Aston Martin have noticeably moved backwards in terms of relative performance to the rest of the grid. Crack believes Aston Martin still has a lot to optimize from its current specification. I think always when you put new parts on the car, you have to do a bit of a little learning loop. How is your car behaving in different conditions, in different ride heights? We have a lot to learn, and we have to also develop the car further over the next races. Red Bull have worked out the best way to maximize the DRS effect, and the rest of the teams are just going to have to do their best to copy Red Bull. Hamilton might want the media to start asking questions, but in Spa, Red Bull will go straight back to the top of the speed trap sheet. Unless McLaren can upset them, but you'll have to watch our last video to learn more about that. Do you think Hamilton is onto something, and Red Bull have been asked to change something on their car? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.